For this soap, I'm going to be using a 6 by 6 inch mold from Brambleberry. It's 2 inches deep. That's not really a very convenient size or shape for making production numbers of bars of soap, but for testing out either a new recipe or a new swirl pattern, it's kind of nice. I've been admiring some corner pours and other swirls where there are very, very fine lines of color and sharply defined between each other. So I'm going to try for that today. I'm going to use 4 colors in this soap. The white will be colored with about 3/4 of a teaspoon of white kaolin clay. And then for the deep red, I have about 1/2 teaspoon of white kaolin plus a little over 1/4 teaspoon of Australian red reef clay. For brown, I'm using about 3/4 of a teaspoon of white kaolin with about 1.5 teaspoons of instant coffee. And then for yellow, I'm using about 1/2 teaspoon of Brazilian gold clay. I will hydrate all of those with a little bit of water before I put the soap in them. And then that should give us 4 colors in the soap. So here's my mold. I have this corner propped up a little so that the batter will run away from it. I'm going to do my colors in red, white, brown, yellow order. And I'm going to start out with a corner pour here. I'm using these Brambleberry pouring pitchers that have a very fine lip on them. Lets you place the flow of the liquid very easily. And as you may be able to see, this batter is really thin, just almost water thin. It's thoroughly mixed and emulsified, but it's certainly nowhere near trace. This recipe is a little harder than the one I've been using. It is 20% coconut, 10% beef tallow, 30% lard, and 40% olive oil. So adding the tallow as a substitute for part of the lard should harden it up a bit, which means it may move faster on me here than previous soaps have been. My experience with coffee is that it tends to lighten up as the soap cures, but it should stay brown. Some people have asked me if it smells good. Actually, no. When you mix the lye into a coffee soap, it smells horrible, kind of like burning garbage. Fortunately, that smell goes away once the soap solidifies, but you certainly don't get a coffee scent out of it. Now my color's sinking in. prop out now for the last couple rounds. Making a mess around the mold. Yellow is kind of overwhelming compared to the other colors, so I'm going to save a little red to put at the very end, I think. Otherwise, I'm going to use these up this time. I'm using Nature's Garden Patchouli fragrance oil in this, which is nice and slow moving and doesn't discolor significantly. Okay, I think that's nice. So I want to swirl this with a thin skewer. This is actually the handle of an artist's paintbrush. I'm going to start with radial stripes, but make them pretty close together. Then I'm going to make semicircular cross stripes. Call that done. Here is the soap the next day. It shows quite a lot of roughness on the top. I will plane that off once I get it unmolded. This is a fairly flexible mold, so I can bend the sides out and then it should pop right out. I can feel the seal breaking. There it goes. So, there's the finished loaf. I think that's too big to fit in my cheese slicer, so I'm going to have to use a knife to slice that. Back with a knife. I'm not measuring this, I'm just kind of doing it visually. These are not going to be traditionally shaped bars of soap, but I think they'll be fine. not getting very parallel sides to this. They're going to be kind of at angles. So, it's quite pretty on the sides. We just slice some tops off here and see what they look like. There's a nice pattern on that. And maybe I can square this up a bit too. I usually save these extra scraps to rebatch later, so they're not really wasted. These are planed, smoothed, and I really like that very fine pattern. That's the bottom. This was the top. Some nice complicated striping there. So this is the bottom with a little bit of the very bottom planed away. So the striping does come through really low. That's the top again. If you notice on this side, the brown is quite light, whereas over here it's very dark. That's a coffee thing. I think as it cures, it'll all end up quite a bit lighter than this is. This is probably more what it'll look like when it finishes. I don't know what's going on there chemically, but coffee does seem to fade over time in a curing soap. That was the mold wall. May cut that off eventually. It's not very level. That is to say, it's not perfectly rectangular, but I like it.